series called 50 Days of Transformation. And the whole thing is, for those of you who are familiar with the gospel, it's about transformation. That's really what it's about. It's about transformation. It's about taking human life, taking normal human life, and transforming it into something that's a lot better. And so what we've done the last 7 weeks is we've been looking at these different arenas of life, these different areas, and then seeing how the gospel applied to those areas results in transformation and results in health of those areas, really. And so we've looked at the spiritual health of life. We've looked at the emotional. We've looked at the relational last week, all these different arenas, and how when the gospel is applied to them, they change. They become something different and something better. And so what we have 2 more weeks left. Next week we'll be looking at work and career and the vocational and how the gospel applied to the vocational results in vocational health. And this week we do something really fun. And I know that you guys woke up this morning and we're really hoping that we talk about this in church this morning. We're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about the green, money. And I know that's everyone's favorite subject to talk about anywhere, not just church of all places. But it's actually very important that we talk about it. Even though we don't like to talk about it, it's extremely important that we do. And we address it because Jesus talked about it. He talked about it a lot. Do you guys know Jesus talked about money more than he talked about heaven and hell combined? Let that sink in for a second. Jesus talked more about money to the people who followed him than about heaven and hell combined. About half of the parables he taught, that was his main means of teaching, about half of the parables he taught were related to money. So Jesus clearly thought that this was somewhat important. And we go, okay, well, wait a minute, why? Christianity is not about money, is it? It's about something, better, something deeper than money. It's not just money. So why did Jesus spend so much time talking about it? And I think the answer is the fact that money has the potential to dominate. How many of you guys know that's true? Money has the potential to dominate our lives, and clearly, because it's been dominating the lives of man for thousands and thousands of years, ever since the concept was invented. It has incredible potential for bad, as we see acted out in the world all the time, and then incredible potential for good as well. And so Jesus was concerned with it. And see, in Jesus' day, he saw the bad acted out a lot. Because there was this thing in the Roman Empire, and the thing was driven by money. Even with the Jews, even with the religious leaders, so many of them were drawn away with the hope of gain, with the hope of getting more money and turning from their God or betraying their people for the sake of material gain. And I think today we have even more of a problem because so much of our culture is built around the dollar bill. So much of our culture and so much of our, I guess you could say the American dream, has been twisted over time to become mostly about material possession, material wealth. And we spend so much time thinking about money and thinking about how much we have or how much we don't have, and then working for more, and then getting more, and then spending more. And then if there's something left over, we save more, maybe, hopefully, probably not. And that's the thing is, if you don't learn how to manage it, and not just managing it like, financially being shrewd, but managing it in terms of where it lies in your priorities, it's going to manage you. It just will. If you don't get in the driver's seat and start controlling how you see your money and where you put it, and how you deal with it, and how you prioritize it, and where you seek it in terms of your list of top 10 most important things to you, it's going to take first place pretty naturally. So it becomes very important that we talk about this. And today I want to talk about giving some guidelines here that are very, very much, according to this culture, a very new way of thinking about money, very counterculture way of thinking about money, because so much of what God has to say about money is so different than what we've been taught. Because the simple fact is, look, most Christians, realistically, most people and most Christians are very poor managers of their money. Very few people have an emergency savings fund. Very, very few people have little to anything saved up for retirement. Very few people are living within their means. Make sense? The majority of people live beyond their means because we live in a culture that says, okay, there's a thing I want, and I'll buy it when I have the money for it. We've somehow created this new idea where we say, there's a thing I want, and I'm going to buy it now even though I don't have the money for it, and then I'll spend the next 6 months trying to get the money so I can afford to buy the thing I bought 6 months ago. It's a really messed up system, but this is what we do, and we take it for granted because, well, it's just, everybody does that. And of course, it's debt, and then we go, like, debt is this terrifying thing. It's a really terrifying thing to think about, but we all take it for granted because probably almost everyone in this room is in debt, myself included, because we all get caught up in the current, and this is our culture, and money is this massive source of worry for so many people. Money is this massive, I believe, according to the most recent statistics, it's the #1 cause of divorce in America. This massive cause of strife and difficulty when it's managed incorrectly. And so the hope is here is that we can look at what Jesus has to say about this, look at what God has to say about this, transform the way that we think about it, and then it can give us some relief. Reduce some of our stress and bring health to that area, which is going to increase our joy and satisfaction, and the stress goes down and everything will be good. That's the hope, right? We can hope at least. So let's test it out today. And this is the thing about Jesus, and really this whole series. People say, well, Christianity, well, Jesus, the spiritual guru. And we imagine him, he did all this teaching for 3 years, and somehow we get it in our heads. He's walking around with people, and he's throwing out these hyper-spiritual anecdotes, like teaching them how to become one with themselves, or really see the truth of the universe, or all these things that are beyond practical somehow. But if you read Jesus' words, it was 100% extremely focused on being practical. Because that's what the gospel is. It's saying, look, let's come down to real human life. The nitty, the gritty, the emotional, and the relational, and all of this stuff that you deal with on a daily basis. And now let me tell you how to manage it correctly and how to live it out correctly. Because I'm the Son of God, and my dad created everything and created you, and I think he would know how to do it correctly, if anyone would, right? That's what Christianity is. Jesus comes down and says, hey, here's how to do it. Here's how to do it, and you really can't do it separated from me. So get in touch with me first, and then everything else starts to come in line. And so money, being one of those major areas of life, is no exception to this. Jesus had a lot to say about it because it is a major area of his culture 2,000 years ago and of ours today and of every culture in between. And so Jesus has a lot to say about this, and we'll look at that as we go on here. But as a disclaimer, before we go any further, this is not a message that is designed to increase your giving to this ministry or to any other ministry. That is not the goal of what we're talking about here. This is not a message saying you need to give more. This is a message about managing money correctly and managing money well. And it's very important to think and discuss about this stuff because Jesus did. And he did it a lot, and he did it for a good reason. If you're talking about transforming the main areas of your life, money absolutely qualifies. So let's get into this. Any questions? Don't actually ask any questions because this will turn into a chaotic room really quick. Sometimes I wish we were in a big classroom and I had like a blackboard and we could actually have questions, but there's so many of you that, Okay, so what we're going to do here, here's the format this is going to take. We're going to look at 4 guidelines, 4 biblical guidelines for approaching money and where to place it in terms of priority and how to view it, okay? Because we have a messed up view of it. We have a messed up view, and we don't even know it because this is how everyone in our culture views it. We have a messed up view, we have a messed up way of dealing with it, and hopefully we can look at what the Bible has to say and start changing that a little bit. So let's look at 4 basic guidelines for how to deal with money. 4 things we have to remember, 4 things we have to start doing. Here's the first one. Every single day, and this has to do more than anything with a paradigm shift, a basic shift in the way we view our stuff. And this is kind of far out there for the moment, but I'll explain what I mean. Every single day, we have to remember and remind ourselves that it all belongs to God. Every single day, we have to wake up and remind ourselves that it all belongs to God. And we say, well, wait a minute. What do you mean? Because, this is I earned this stuff. I worked hard for my money, and I spent my money on my stuff, so it's mine. I earned it. I made it. And you back up for a second and you say, well, wait a minute, who made you? And who made the earth that you're standing on and living in? Who made the air that you breathe? And who made the universe that you exist in? And you say, okay, yeah, well, God did. God did. If God made it, then whose is it? Realistically? You say, look what I made. I made a wooden rocking horse out of the tree I cut down. I made it. You say, that's great, but did you make the tree? No. Did you make the earth? No. Did you make anything that, like, aside from actually taking the raw material and turning it into this form, were you involved in the process before that? No. Well, God did it. And in the end, it's his, and the earth is his, and the universe is his, and I'm his, and you're his. And we say, well, no, but that's fine, but that's mine. No, it's God's. Was it yours before you were born? No. Will it be yours after you die? No. Whose will it be? When all human beings are off of this earth, whose will it be? God's. Because it's his now, and it was his then, and it will be his forever. It's his, but it's also ours, and we're using it, right? Like, yes, that is our stuff. We have dominion over it, but in the big picture, it's his. And so there's this weird idea we have to kind of get in our heads that, yes, it's God's, we're using it, and effectively, it's like a loan. It's like a loan. It's like an entrustment. It's God's, but he says, I'm going to loan this to you for 10 years or 20 years or 40 years or 80 years or however long. You get to use it for X amount of time or while you're alive. And so again, this is kind of far out here. This is so far beyond our way of thinking with this. So just track with me for a moment. This is a basic paradigm shift of how we view stuff, of how we view our things. And the idea is everything that we have belongs to God. If God said, I want it back, you're really not going to be able to do much to say no for very long. If God says, give me that, you're not going to be like, no, it's mine. Come take it from me, God. Well, he will, because it's his. It's his stuff. He made it, and it's very important to talk about this because this regards a worldview, okay? This regards a worldview. And if you are able to just make it click for a second, because so often you can talk about stuff like this, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting way of thinking about it, and you never let it sink into your head, and you never let it actually, start putting on that lens or that worldview and look at your things for a second. So I challenge you, just for a moment, close your eyes, everyone. Close your eyes, please. And think of your stuff, okay? Think of your house, and your car, and your television, and your bank account, and all your favorite material things. And you say, well, yes, those are my things. They're not my neighbors. They're not my dad's. They're not my sister's. They're my things. But now imagine for a second that those things that you have that are your things, the only reason that you have any of them is because God has allowed you to. And so think about them for a second, not as here's my stuff, but here's God's stuff that he's allowed me to have. You can open your eyes now. That changes a lot. That changes a lot about the way you think about things. And obviously, again, this is very far out. I had to force you to all close your eyes for a second and think in unison before it hopefully clicked even a little bit. But if we can wake up in the morning and start saying, okay, this stuff I have, this bed I sleep on, the car I'll drive to work, this stuff I have, it is God's, and he's allowing me to use it. And it changes a whole lot. It changes a lot about worry, and it changes a lot about the kind of questions you ask yourself. It changes things from how can I get more stuff for me to what am I doing with God's property? How am I managing God's property? You say, how am I managing my body? How am I managing my time and my responsibilities and my money? Because suddenly it's not a matter of spending things for you to make you happy. It's a matter of, am I wisely handling the things that God has entrusted to me or not? It's a serious question, and we'll talk about that more in a few minutes here. But it changes a lot about the way we think. I don't want to linger on this idea for too long because it's really easy to get, this one can, maybe more than anything else we talk about, this one can lose people. And you're like, I like that's a neat idea, but I don't really get it. But so if that's totally beyond your line of thinking, that's okay. Hopefully that'll sink in the next few years maybe, who knows. Either way, we're going to move on. So let that sit in your mind for a few moments. Everything that you have is God's, and we need to learn how to remind ourselves of that fact every day because it changes a lot. Here's number 2. God uses money to gauge us and to teach us and to test us. Now, that's an interesting one. God uses money to test us. And here's this interesting idea. Did you know that God does not automatically give great blessings to just anyone? Did you know that God doesn't automatically give great callings and great responsibilities and great resources to do great things with to just anyone? Do you know that? You say, it'd be really nice if God gave me all this crazy amount of stuff to do all this good with. But did you know that God so often will first see if we are mature enough and we're responsible enough to handle the big things he wants to give us? Do you know that? Jesus talks about it. And we'll get there in a moment. But so often, it's a test. You know, it's, in general, so many of the things that God kind of allows us to go through, he said, I'm going to test your mettle. I'm going to see what you're made of. I want you to see what you're made of. I want the people around you to see what you're made of. I want you to prove to me what you're made of. Just like God said to Abraham, you know what, I really want to use you. I need to see if you're committed to this. And he said, now, kill your own son. You going to obey me or not? You're going to trust that I'm bigger than even something crazy like that? And so often we go through these things. And God says, I want to see what you're made of. Show me. Show me where your priorities lie. Show me where your trust lies and where your faith lies. And I think money is probably his favorite tool in this day and age because it tells us a lot. It tells us a lot, okay? Three things specifically we're going to quickly look at that money shows. It shows to us, it shows to the world, it shows to God. Three things that how we manage our money, how we spend our money, what we do with our money show to God. Here's the first one. Money shows what you love the most, doesn't it? Money shows what you love the most. Jesus said this. He says, wherever your treasure is, there your heart, or there your desires will be also. There the desires of your heart will be also. Wherever you put your treasure to, wherever your treasure is. In other words, how I spend my money, what I do with my money, it shows God and it shows everyone else what I love the most. The things I'm prioritizing my money to, the things I'm prioritizing my time to, it's what I love the most. It's what I love the most. And so if you guys, you want to go home and you want to take a look at your calendar or your schedule or your bills, it's going to give you a pretty good idea about the things you care about the most. It's going to give you a good idea of where your priorities lie, whether that's with God or with your family or with your entertainment. Take a look at your schedule. Take a look at where you spend your time and where you spend your money. And it gives you a really good idea of where your heart lies. So that's the first thing that money shows. That money shows God, the way we handle it and manage it. The second thing is it shows where we put our trust. It really shows where we put our trust, the way we spend it, the way we hoard it, the way we seek it, the way we manage it. It shows God where our trust is and where our security is. It shows God what we have faith in, whether it's him that we're trusting for our security or whether it's money. Whether it's him that we're trusting for our happiness or whether it's money. Whether it's him that we're trusting for our identity as human beings or whether it's stuff and things and the physical and the appearance and whatever else. It shows God really quick where we put our trust. And then the last thing here flips the second one on its head. Because it's not a matter of where we put our trust, it's a matter of whether God can trust us. That's the third one. The way we manage our money shows God pretty quickly if he can trust us with more. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that weird? It's weird because it makes common sense. And we don't like to apply common sense to God. But he's the one that originated common sense because he's the most sensical. Imagine for a second. You guys familiar with Warren Buffett? Extremely, extremely wealthy guy, okay? Very, very wealthy man. Imagine you were his child, okay? Imagine you are the sole child of Warren Buffett, and Dad comes into you one day and he says, you know what? One day I want to give you everything I have. I want to give it all to you. And right now I'm going to give you a little bit. And if you manage it well, I'm going to give you all of it. It's a neat scenario. It'd be nice. And you'd probably try really hard to manage the little that he's given you. so that he'll give you the rest later on. But he wants to do that. The reason he does that is because he wants to know that the stuff he's going to give you isn't going to be swindled. It's not going to be blown away with the wind. It's not going to be squandered, right? It's common sense. Look, I want to give you all this. I just want to see how you manage this much so I can know that I can trust you. This is what Jesus says. He says, look, how we manage what we have right now. Because remember that first point. What we have right now is what God has given us. It's God's. He's trusted us with it. And how we manage the things we have right now determine how God can bless your life and entrust you with greater things and greater responsibilities and greater callings and greater resources. Because God's no dummy. He's not going to trust his resources and his great callings with people who are not trustworthy with them. Isn't that a novel thought? Once again, more common sense from God. The way you manage your money and the way you manage your stuff, the things you have right now, God's looking at it. And if you're faithful with little, you'll be faithful with much. And he'll quickly start giving you much to be faithful with. But this is the thing. We go, oh, my life isn't going anywhere, and oh, I have so little, and if only God would lead me to a bigger and better place and give me more, and then I could start doing really good things with all my money, and then I could start, doing this great ministries like these other people, and then I could do this and I could do that. If only I had more. If only I was in a better place. Maybe we should stop waiting for that next thing and start being as faithful as we can with what we have right now. Because God is not going to lead us to a greater thing until we can prove that we can handle the greater thing. Because with great power comes with great responsibility, to quote Uncle Ben. Anyone? Spider-Man? Come on. You guys got to throw me a bone when I give you a nerd reference. That's true, though. With great power comes great responsibility. With great power comes great ability to mess up that power. And God doesn't want to put somebody in a place of great responsibility unless he's pretty confident they can handle it. He's not going to throw some person who has the maturity of a 10-year-old into a high responsibility position. Hopefully. That's the idea. And how we manage the stuff that we have, God's watching it, and it tells him a lot. It tells him a lot about our maturity. It tells him a lot about how responsible we are and how ready we are to make the next step and to be trusted with more and bigger things. Because there's a direct connection with our level of maturity and our management of money. There's a direct connection with God's blessings in your life and how we manage the stuff that we have. So that's number 2. God uses money to test us and to gauge us and to see where we're at. So here's number 3. Money is a tool. Money is a tool. It's a tool that can be used for God's purposes in incredible ways. And it's a tool that can be used for terrible, terrible things. I think we're all aware of this. The same amount of money that can be used to build an incredible, world-changing, life-saving ministry can be used to fund a drug cartel that will tear apart individuals and families. So money is a tool. It's not inherently evil. It's not inherently good. It is a tool. And so the Bible tries to give us the priority here, okay? It says, love people, use money. You should love people, and you should be using money to love people. But we get it tragically reversed. In our culture, it's love money, use people. And you use people to take steps higher up to get more money, to get more stuff. You use more people to get more stuff. And see, somehow it's become flipped between money being a means to the end that is love, and now money is the end in and of itself. It's the end we seek. You know how many people are like, what's the meaning of life? Well, I'm just really trying to get as much stuff as I can. You ever seen that bumper sticker that says, he who dies with the most toys wins? How tragic. Because money has somehow now become the end that we seek in this culture. instead of the tool that we're supposed to use. And we are supposed to use it. It's not this wicked thing. It's not this evil thing that we should avoid. We're not supposed to hoard it. We're not supposed to pursue it. We're supposed to use it. We're supposed to use it to save lives and to do good and to support great things and to honor God. Here's something interesting. Do you ever wonder how Jesus and his disciples could spend 3 years roaming the streets, roaming Judah, teaching and preaching? Like, was God just conjuring up like beds for them to sleep on and food for them to eat? It was the wild. They could just catch what they wanted. No, this was mostly civilization. How did they eat? How did they live? Ever wonder that? I'll tell you why. It's because people with money believed in the ministry that Jesus Christ was doing, and they funded him. Did you know that? Huh. And Jesus didn't say, oh, no, if you have money, you're automatically a bad person. He said, awesome, now I can do the work of God because I'm being funded by people who are using money as the tool that it is, a tool that can be used to do incredible things. And that's the idea. Best use of money, one of the best uses of money is to further God's kingdom with it, and we can do that with money. You can further God's kingdom. You can hold up ministries that are doing incredible things. You can support missionaries that are doing effective work for the kingdom of God with money. And it's a tool that we are to use. And here's the truth. God pays attention to that. God pays attention to what you're doing with it. And one day there's going to be an audit. And the only auditor is going to be God. And the only one being audited will be you. And you'll be sitting there and you're going to have to give an account to what you did with the tool that was in your hands. And God's going to say, he's going to say, what did you do with what you had? Here's what he's not going to say. He's not going to say, why didn't you have more? God will not ask you, why didn't you have more? He's going to say, what did you do with what you had? What did you do with that? He's not going to care how much you had. He's going to care what you did with it. This is the Matthew chapter 25. One of the great parables that Jesus told was the parable of the talents. With the master who said, to you I give this amount of money, to you I give this amount, and to you I give this amount. He said, you get 10 portions, you get 5, you get 1. He goes on a trip, and he comes back. The guy who had 10 doubled it while he was gone. The guy who had 5 doubled it while the master was gone. The guy who had 1 did nothing with it. He did nothing. And the guy who had 1, he goes, well, it's not fair. I only had 1. And you only gave me 1. I didn't want to mess it up or lose it, so I just didn't do anything with it. And the master gets very, very angry. We're like, oh, he's angry because he didn't make as much money as the guy with 10 or 5, but that's just not fair. And that's not why he's angry. He's angry because he did nothing with what he had. He was as happy and as joyful and as full of praise for the guy who produced 5 portions with his 5 as he was for the guy who produced 10 with his 10. Because it wasn't about how much he had. It wasn't about this big end product. Well, you actually made more money than you did, so I'm happier with you. He said, I gave you this much, and you did everything you could with the portion I gave you. This is what you did with what you had, and it was amazing, and it was great. And this guy with 1, he says, you are wicked, and you are evil, and I have given you these things. I entrusted you with this stuff, and you did nothing with it. You wasted the resources that I entrusted to you. You guys remember how we're supposed to wake up in the morning and say, the stuff I have is God's? It is really true, and he's entrusted us with it. He said, here are some resources that I'm going to give you. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? And the question we've got to ask ourselves very carefully, and the question that he is going to ask us when all of this is said and done, what did you do with what you have? Not what you wish you had, not what you might have someday. What are you doing with what you've got right now? What are you doing with it? People say, well, I don't have enough to do anything. I don't have enough. If I had more, I could do something. But I don't have enough to make a difference. But it was like the woman who gave one penny when the rich man gave a lot of money. And Jesus was so blessed by the woman that gave just one penny to the temple. Why? Because that's what she could do with what she had. Whereas for the rich man, this huge sum of money was just, it was nothing. It was a drop in the bucket for him. But she was making a sacrifice. She was sowing into something with what she could do. And that blessed his heart. You guys get that? I don't have enough to do anything. Who decides what is enough? Well, if it's under $100, God doesn't register that. It's only registered, for blessings in heaven someday if it's over X amount of money. You've got something entrusted to you. Maybe you have no money. Maybe you have literally no money, but you've got abilities and time and strengths, and you've got stuff that you can do stuff with. God's entrusted things to you. What are you doing with them? If you haven't applied that question to you yet, if I'm throwing this out here and you're like, that's an interesting question, but if you haven't applied it to you yet, please apply it to yourself and your life and your stuff before you leave this room. That's a really important question to ask. What are you doing with the stuff that God has entrusted to you? What is going to be your answer when God says, what did you do with the stuff that I gave to you? And the last point we need to remember here, the last thing we need to understand, is that if we are faithful with little, God trusts us with more. If we are faithful with little, God trusts us with more. The question is, are we going to invest it well or not? God says, is my investment a good investment or not? Are you going to prove me to be a good investor, or are you going to waste the amount I gave to you? And in the parable of the talents, chapter 21, this is the master. He was full of praise. He saw what his servants did, and they sowed in with the money they had. And he was so glad and so happy. And we have a verse up here in verse 21. He says, well done, you good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with little. I will trust you with much. This is how God works. He says, you've proven yourself. You've proven yourself mature and responsible and faithful. I'm going to give you a lot more because you've shown yourself to be trustworthy. And this is what we say. Well, you know what? When I make it big, when my heyday comes, then I'm going to start being so generous. And then I'm gonna support the ministries I believe in. There's that missionary who I've been thinking about for a while. When I make it big, when this happens, or when this happens, or when I get that raise, or when that tax return comes, I'll do this and this and this, and then I'll start tithing, and then I'll start giving to all these wonderful ministries I believe in. No, you won't. If you're not going to be faithful with little, you're not going to be faithful with much. You're proving that to yourself and to God with what you're doing. So the question is, are you going to be faithful with the little you have? Because when you are, God wants to trust us with more. He wants to blow up our bank account so we can do crazy. And here's the thing, oh my gosh, Nate's teaching prosperity theology. No, I'm not, okay? I think if every single one of us was at a maturity level that God knew that we would take millions of dollars and change the world with it, he'd probably give us all millions of dollars. But the majority of Christians are in no state to be given $1 million, much less $1,000, and be trusted with it. That's really sad. But that's the point that Jesus is trying to make. If you are faithful with little, I will be faithful to give you much, so you can continue to be faithful with it. It's not like if you can just be faithful with this little amount, then God can give you a lot, and then you can do whatever you want with it. You prove yourself faithful with little so that you can be faithful with much. That's what the gospel is all about. It's about transforming your money into the tool that it is. Transforming the way you view it and seeing it as not just this stuff that's for you, for your enjoyment, for your happiness, to sow into your entertainment or whatever. It is a tool that God has entrusted to you. And he's asking you the question, what are you going to do with the stuff that you have right now? What are you going to do with it? And this is not meant to be a discouraging message or anything like that. It's meant to be challenging and, if anything, encouraging. Because money is a tool that we have at our disposal, and it's not just the scary question, what are you going to do with what you have? It's this question of, wow, I have this tool. What can I start doing with the stuff that I have? You know, if everyone in this room started really viewing their money like that, we would make a serious difference in this city. You realize that? It doesn't take a lot of people to start viewing money the correct way before things start changing around them. So as we have the band come up as we wrap up, I'm gonna pray to close this out. But Father, thank you that money it's not this wicked, evil entity. It is something that is redeemable. It is something that is a wonderful and incredible tool that you can use to change the world, and that we can use to sow into things that are valuable and things that are worthwhile. Father, I pray that you would help that question sink into our minds. You let that question, what are we doing with the things that we've been entrusted with? You let it sink into our minds, God. That we'd wake up in the morning, we'd be reminded that the stuff that we have has been given to us by you as an investment, as a blessing. God saying, here's the stuff, I want you to enjoy it, and I want you to use it. God, would you help that question to resonate in our hearts over the next few days and over the next few weeks. And I pray that you'd begin to bring transformation to our financial worlds. We love you, Father. Amen. We're going to have a moment here as the band plays one last song where you guys can stand up and worship. But I want you, if you could, while we're singing this last song, to just let that question sit on your heart. What am I doing with what I have? Am I sowing into God's kingdom? Am I sowing into things that are worthwhile, or am I blowing it with the little I've got? Let that sit on your heart. Respond to God. Respond to Jesus Christ right now as we sing this last song.